I'm doing good. How are you guys doing? Good.
We talked to Shep yesterday, and we talked to Shep yesterday. He talked a little bit about you guys playing a little bit more base defense and just the challenges that puts on an offense just from the different coverages, pressure packages you can do from that. A guy like Derek Barnes, how important is he to you guys kind of being able to do some of those things?
Well, I think Derek's very important, but I think it also includes the rest of the linebacker room as well as the safeties. You know, people go to nickel when they go to, one back, three receiver, 11 personnel for the coverage matchups. Well, we're fortunate enough to have athletes at the linebacker position that we're comfortable playing in space, in zone coverage. We have safeties that we're comfortable lining up in man-to-man on wide receivers. And then we like that because it gives us a chance to make it difficult for other teams to run the ball on a base front, where then now they're in a position that they might have to ask a wide receiver to block a linebacker or a defensive end. And most offenses I've been around, that's not something they want to do.
Can you expand on that a little bit? Just obviously they're all physically gifted, your starting linebackers, but their mental acumen, being around here as long as they have the depth of knowledge of the scheme. What kind of flexibility and confidence does that give you guys when you're scheming up a game plan?
It gives a lot of confidence. I mean, you look at, this is Alex's more than fifth year because of where he came from. You're looking at Derek being in his fifth year, I believe his fifth year now. Jack's going into his fourth year now, third or fourth year. And these are guys that have been in the system since they walked in the door. And the guy that was coaching them is now running the show. And the system has been built, and the way those guys have been coached, and Ham is continuing the same process where they have to get into the mind of what calls are coming before they come. That's a point of emphasis where not only do they have to know what we're doing, but they understand why and what we're trying to accomplish. And when you keep a group together for as long as they've been together, that's the process you get. That's the result. The result that you get is these guys put the time in, they learn, they see the game through Shep's eyes, and then that allows us to play faster and do more on defense.
I know he's not playing big snaps for you, but Zach Cunningham had a couple, important tackles down on the goal line last week. Dan just said, he's going to be out. How do you make up for, missing a vet like that? Well,
that's kind of what we do, right? Next guy up, we just got to get the next guy in the room and get him prepared, ready to play. We've made a concerted effort to get repetitions for our second string or our backups and our guys that are not necessarily the starters. So, because we all know the NFL, you're not going to have the same 11 guys for 17 games. Those backups, those guys that are maybe on the practice squad get called up, those guys are going to be counted on. I mean, we got a great, example of it from all of last year. And so those guys have to be dialed in the meeting room. They got to get their reps on the practice field and in walkthroughs. And then the standard is there's no drop off. Like, you got to go in and you got to do your job.
Kind of in that same vein, you guys got contributions from all your depth players in that game. How much of an asset is it to not just have guys who are ready to step in case of injury, but guys you can use 1 through 6 in a game?
Well, it keeps the load off, right? We try to get to a position where you start looking into that play count stuff, right? You got 17 games, X amount of number of plays, how many linebackers, 2, 3, how many guys, and you got that head count. And the last time I checked, I don't know of any player in the history of the NFL that's had 100% play count. And so this is a marathon, not a sprint. We need to be healthy, fresh in weeks 15, 16, 17 going into the playoffs. And the way you do that is you build depth so guys don't have to play 65 out of 65 plays, that we can get guys that are not starters but are still capable of executing the job that we ask of them. And you get those guys in the game, and it takes the load off the frontline guys.
Where have you seen the biggest growth with Nowoski?
Excuse me?
Where have you seen the biggest growth with Trevor?
I think Trevor's biggest growth is the game it's not as fast for him right now. As much as he played last year, he appears to me like the speed of the game is he from where he came from, right? He comes from Division II football. That's a pretty big jump to the NFL. Well, now he's kind of getting into that where he's a pro now. He's a veteran. Right, he's not a young rookie, first or second year guy. He's been around now where the speed of the game has slowed down a little for him, so he's able to have that confidence and go out and play at a speed where he can compete with the best in this league.
When we talk to Jim O'Neill last week, he said Shep feels almost like he's been doing this for 4 or 5 years, just how naturally he's taken to the coordinator role. Obviously, Calvin's cited you as a mentor, and you're serving in that defensive assistant role. How have you seen just his acclimation to the role? How have you seen him grow in just this short period of time?
Well, like what you see is what you're seeing for the whole entire defense. We talked about this in the spring, right? It's an extension of what's been going on in the linebacker room, right? AG used to talk about you're the head coach of your position. Well, now he's the head coach of the defense, and there's a level of detail. There's a focus on making sure that the standards are upheld and accountability with players, coaches, everybody. And that's who he is. That's who he was as a player. Back when I remember him being in our days in Miami and when he was here in 2018. And that's what's come through that I've seen him as a coach. And it's reflected in the way his players play. These guys know I got a coach who's going to give me as much of the answers as can be given, and we're going to go into a game and have answers so we can play fast.
Derek Barnes was playing so well at the beginning of last season. It feels like he's picked up where he left off despite the injury. At what point did you guys realize this summer or in training camp that he was going to be able to kind of lock back into the player he was last year despite all that time off?
Well, I think I try not to make those judgments until we actually line up and play real football. Preseason, training camp, scrimmages, even the controlled practices against the other opponents, the joint practices, you see the glimmers and you hold out hope, and he's done well, in the build back up to where he was. And obviously there's still levels to go, right? You're never satisfied where you say, okay, I'm good. That's good enough. He's going to be in a position where going forward, the opponents are going to get tougher. The games are going to get bigger and more meaningful. And so each time he's got to up his level of play, and I think he's going to be doing that more than well. He's going to do that very well. But you don't know until we go out and play a game. And so when we lined up out there and we see how it is when we're playing real opponents, yeah, we're real happy with that.
We had some fun talking about QB spy with Shep yesterday. Mm-hmm. Obviously, he was against that in the past and had some fun with that. Just how did you see his take on that evolve going into that Ravens game last week?
Well, I think it's like in the discussions that we've had, I think when you look at it, I think what I would argue I'm still against, and as he would still be against, is when you just line up and say, here's what we are, and that's the spy. And the other team knows exactly, basically you're telling the offense that, hey, we're playing with 10 guys right now. I think that is what we won't do. Because now the offense is already at an advantage, and you can't allow them to know what you're doing to give them an even bigger advantage. So, who it is, where they're coming from, who's in the rush, what's the look, is it pressure, is it coverage? The advantage we have to gain back is keeping the quarterback and the play callers on their toes so that we can't telegraph what we're doing. These offenses are really good. Like, these are NFL offensive coaches, and if you just line up and let them know what you're going to do on defense, they're going to tear you to pieces. I don't care who they are. These are the best quarterbacks, the best coaches in the world at this level. So I would say that I would say the way he and I have talked about it in the past, we're still against that. Like, that is not something I would ever see us doing. I think we found ways to be multiple in how we deal with these quarterbacks that now the other team doesn't know what we're doing. And that's the key to the game.
You were director of football research. Where do you think you guys are on the cutting edge from an analytics standpoint?
Well, my job when I was doing that under the previous regime was less about analytics, and it was more about being able to help both sides of the ball in terms of, like, as everybody calls analytics. I'm not a numbers guy. I mean, we'll study tendencies for each week and stuff like that, but the whole analytics reports and all that stuff, all that PFF and those guys, that's not my cup of tea. That was handled by other people, and that was just a way for the way I was able to work with both sides of the ball in that previous role.
Shep said some of the things that Casey Rogers did in Tampa really helped out with this Baltimore game plan specifically. How have you seen him leave his mark on this defensive defensive staff?
Well, first of all, we talked about it again in the spring. I think Casey is as outstanding a defensive line coach as there is. I think we're very fortunate to have his veteran experience presence. We talked about it last time. Like, he still teaches me. I'm, 16 years in this league, and I'm still watching him learning new things and seeing how he's evolved as a coach, where you got to stay ahead of the curve, right? You can't just be sitting around coaching and teaching what you were back in 2006, 2007, 2008, because the game has changed. And he's an outstanding defensive line coach that gets his guys the information they need, gets them in position, and then he brings ideas to the staff that when he talks, we should all listen. Guys won a Super Bowl, been on a number of high caliber championship level defenses, and to have a presence like that in our room you can't measure that.
Just to go back to the QB spy thing one more time, how critical is it to have a linebacking core that's so varied in what they do, cross-trained across all positions, to be able to disguise your QB spy each time?
Well, it's huge, because certain teams, if you don't have the variability, the athletes we have, you can present a picture and they can know, no, that guy's not doing that. You see our guys walked out on a detached receiver, and there's no guarantee that they're going to come back to the rush or come back to the box. They might stay out there in coverage. And so it allows us to present different pictures to keep them off balance. Again, like I said before, that's the name of the game. We have to do what we can to make sure that the other team doesn't get a beat on what we're doing on defense. Because I'm telling you, when it's a long night, long day at the office, when you're out there and you just know they're a step ahead. I've been in games like that, and it's not a good feeling.
We've seen
last one, Justin.
Jack Campbell hobbling through the locker room for 2 weeks, out there playing with a hole in his face on week 3. When you have a guy that's both tough and dedicated to just being out there every snap, regardless of his arm falling off or whatever, like what kind of tone does that set for a roster, for a defense?
Well, I think he creates a standard. The way he, you see it in practice film all the way back to OTAs when he first got here, running to the ball, the effort for punching the ball out, the physicality that he plays with, it's how he establishes himself as a leader. I mean, make no mistake, that guy's a leader. That guy, Jack Campbell, is a football player, and everything about him is football. Toughness, physicality, the game intelligence, the way he studies, the way he sees the little things, and he creates a standard. And whether you want to or not, you don't want, whether you like it or not, you don't want to be the guy that's on the film next to him and he's blowing past you to get to the ball. So it feeds on to the other guys in the room that says, you know what, maybe I got to pick up my play a little too. And I think collectively as a group, it's not like we got a bunch of guys sitting around watching other people play. Our whole goal is to be a pack of wolves out there trying to go get whoever's got the ball, go get him and get the ball out. And I think Jack does an outstanding job of being a leader of that pack.